house. My name is Tristan, episode number 12. Today I'm reviewing arguably the most unique whiskey I've done so far, and that is the Parker's Heritage 9th Edition, which is a Kentucky straight malt whiskey, aged 8 years. It was from 2015, and in my opinion, was the best release they ever did. And I mean that in terms of uniqueness and less about just another bourbon, another high-aged bourbon, another cask-strength rye. They've done a lot of cool finishes, and a lot of their releases have been very, very unique for limited edition American whiskey releases. However, this I thought was the just most original and most unique. Really, it's a whiskey I think that can bring a lot of Scotch drinkers together with bourbon drinkers, which I have found that a lot of bourbon drinkers I've met, not a lot, but I would say about 40% just don't like Scotch. I met a lot of Scotch drinkers that don't like bourbon. They say it's too sweet. The bourbon drinkers say Scotch can be too smoky. Well, this is basically right in the middle. It is, there's all the info on the back. It's been years since I've even taken a look at this bottle. 65% malted barley, 35% corn. So that's the mash bill. Mostly malted barley, 35% corn. It was from Rickhouse Y, from the 5th and 7th floors. So think of it more as a not single malt, but it's very similar. It has 2 grains, so it's not a single malt by definition. However, it is aged in Kentucky, and so it's a malt whiskey that has a little corn in it. So there's really no one way to define this whiskey. Truly, I had never had anything like it. I've never heard of anything like it since. The American single malt is getting more and more popular, and I think that is amazing. And I think more distillers should be doing single malt in America. But this was kind of ahead of its time. And so, yeah, I wanted to share this with you guys. And because it was probably the least sought after of the Parker's Heritage Collection, you actually can find this at a few shops still. It's probably going to cost you a little bit of, not quite secondary prices, but it's going to be a little more expensive, but it is definitely worth it if you're looking for something unique, definitely collectible. I've seen it in 2 shops in San Francisco, so it is out there. You're not going to find really the bonded, the 20 whatever year olds and whatnot, and those get up into the hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and it's just ridiculously stupid. This one I think at the time was around $80, if I'm not mistaken. Let's get into it. Parker's Heritage is from Heaven Hill, so this is a Heaven Hill product. I mentioned this when I reviewed the 13-year cask-strength wheat whiskey, which was another phenomenal release. This one's bottled at 108 proof, 54%. Kentucky straight malt whiskey. I actually revisited this a couple nights ago, twice, and I just kind of forgot about it. It was in a case, and I kicked myself for forgetting about this. I didn't forget about it, but I just hadn't visited this in years, and I just forgot how amazing of a whiskey this is. Big breakfast notes, a lot of French toast, thick honey, demerara sugars, roasted chocolate-covered peanuts, very, very distinct. Slightly salted, really vivid on the nose. You get a little raisin, a little vanilla, a little nugget, some cranberry, some scone batter, powdered sugar. Again, a lot of breakfast-like notes. Powdered sugar with the French toast, a lot of toasty notes. But the bourbon, well, there's no bourbon in this per se, but you get a lot of bourbon notes from this whiskey because of the heavily charred barrels they use, which they talk about on the back label. So it is not like a lot of malt whiskeys you would find, which don't have that heavily charred presence that a lot of American whiskey has, typically being done in Scotland. This has that. So again, it's really like you're crossing basically a bourbon and a single malt. Truly nice. It has a kind of a candy shell aura to it, like old-time fashioned candies, little peanut brittle, really unique nose on the palate. Drinks just about 108 proof. Cinnamon, woody spices, brown sugars, kind of mixed brown sugars, white corn, barrel char, big barrel char notes, cacao. The barrel char is not bitter though. Blonde coffee, peppered honey, You even get a little furniture polish in there. I almost want to say decadent, but it's very refined. The malt definitely cuts through where a lot of those bourbony American whiskey notes would punch you in the face with a bourbon. The malt is more genteel. It kind of balances out where any note would punch you in the face. Nothing is really sticking out and just jumping out at you. Everything is there and has its own voice, but it's not calm. It's truly a unique whiskey. I've never had anything like this whiskey. The finish is, I would say, medium to long, right in between medium and long. You get more cinnamon, mixed spices, more barrel char, chocolate, caramel, dark coffee now from the blonde. It's now dark coffee, more nutty notes, a little bit of a burnt match almost, but no sulfur. This whiskey, I think, was just, it takes a lot of balls to do something good and not get too out there and do too crazy of some type of cask finish that's going to throw a bunch of people off or just make the expression fail miserably. In my opinion, I think they knocked it out of the park with this one. Again, it's not that it wasn't well received, but it just kind of fell under the radar. It was very ho-hum with a lot of whiskey guys. I know several guys specifically that passed this one up in 2015. They're like, oh, Kentucky malt whiskey. They heard malt, they don't like scotch. Then I remember pouring one for a friend and he loved it and went out and bought a bottle, because if you're a bourbon lover who doesn't like scotch, this could be the gateway whiskey for you, which I think is so important. Because scotch and bourbon do, believe it or not, especially in today's age, have a lot of similarities because of the bourbon casks, using a lot of single malt. This kind of ties it together by creating a whiskey that is, both malt and corn. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm rating this out at a 90, just right there. Barely an A, but definitely an A effort whiskey from Heaven Hill. I can't speak highly enough of their Parker's Heritage line. I haven't sought out any of the recent releases because they're insanely expensive, and I'm just so jaded by so much of the limited editions that are released each year in America. I kind of don't even care anymore, and I'll talk about that in a future episode. This one really did it for me. Kind of just a humble guy that, not too cast strengthy, so it didn't, jump out all the guys who want the cast strength whiskey, and it wasn't some, high-aged bourbon, so it didn't reach the $500+, secondary. Like I said, still sitting on the shelves out there. So Kentucky Straight Malt Whiskey, 9th edition, 2015, Parker's Heritage. Cheers.